And these larger areas, they can be harder than they look. You think that this area would be the hard part and that this would be the easy part. And I mean, obviously this has its own issues because you've got to put the detail in. But when you come to a big expanse like this, it can be harder than you first think because you've only got to start going off in the wrong direction with your fur strokes, and it'll be so obvious, it'll just make it look wrong, you know. So it's not always quite as easy as you might think to work on a big area like this. And certainly, if in doubt, I would never try and put a fur direction in unless I either knew which way it went or I could see which way it went. I would just, you know, I mean, I'm using the directional strokes here, but you can't really see any of the pencil strokes on the paper. So I would either do that or just use the circular strokes. I can see a darker bit here, so pop that in. Said I was going to put some darker areas behind this muzzle, didn't I? And I'm going to do that with the nugget, this nugget that I've got in my hand, because it's nice and subtle, but we want something coming out behind this muzzle. So we've got that first little base layer on. Around here, I'm going to use a coal grey 4, and I'm going to start to put a little bit of these darker bits in that I can see, this darker texture and these darker patches. Again, nice short strokes. And there's some darker grey right at the back of this tummy here before it goes up into the leg. Let's bring that round. And it may seem like we're taking a long time to sort of, you know, build this up, but it really is worth building these layers at one at a time, because that's how we're going to keep this lovely, soft, fuzzy finish to the coat. And I mean, we're still working on quite a big patch. That's quite a big area we've done compared to, you know, the head. We're still going to get through this faster than we did the head. Going to come out the top up here as well and bring a bit of grey out up here. I'm going to put a tiny bit of texture, and I do mean a tiny bit of quite delicate texture over on this back area. You can see that on the reference photograph. I want to come in with this Van Dyke brown again and bring some of this out into this area as well. There is a darker bit that's sort of coming down there. So I find it's always easier, again, when I'm working on a larger space, I find it easier to plot in these little bits, these landmarks, I call them. That sort of breaks up the area, and it means that you've got somewhere to sort of work in between. And you put a few of these in, and before you know it, this large area has become lots of much smaller, manageable sections. So I'd always look to sort of plot in these landmarks first, or very early on at least. And they soon start breaking it up, and it soon starts to become more manageable. And I mean, these don't have to be exact, they don't have to be perfect anyway. We're just looking, they're putting a bit of interest in the fur. They are creating some of the shape and the form of the back. But you know, they don't have to be absolutely perfect, as long as they sort of go in the right direction over the back of the deer, because if they don't go in the right direction, well, that's going to really sort of stick out like a sore thumb, and you know, it's going to make the deer look wrong. We want them all to sort of come down this way around the curve, because you can imagine that this deer is quite got quite a round sort of body, and so that's the way we want the creases to come down. So they're going to follow these follow these sort of contours and this shape of the body down. But apart from that, you know, if you've got some slightly in the wrong place, you're not really going to know much of a difference. Or if you've missed one out, you're not going to know much of a difference. I'm going to make this darker down here. I'm going to start to build this up. I said I was going to make this darker, so I'm going in with the Van Dyke brown down here. And this is just a case of going backwards and forwards now with the right, the pencils, you know, that are the right sort of colours for the areas that I need. And just building it up a little bit, just going backwards and forwards until I'm happy that it's got the right sort of shape, the right form, the right colour, and the right sort of values down. There's a slightly darker area in the centre here, so I'm just going to bring that down. And I've just gone to little circular strokes down here just to blend this out a little bit. Coming in under here with a bit of a dark grey. Oh, the coal grey 5, sorry. Darker grey. Tone some of this brown down. And as I'm putting this dark bit in, you can probably see that when I'm getting to the bit where it meets the lighter colour, I'm sort of flicking up underneath it because I'm putting the dark bit in and I want to sort of push it up under the lighter area. And that's going to create the wispy bits on the lighter fur. And even though I release the pressure off towards the background here, I'm still just sort of flicking up on that edge and then take it into a bit of a circular stroke. That's quite a dark bit, so let's just pop that there. And there are a couple of extra little dark bits down here, so I'm just going to pop those in. There's also a greyer part in the middle here, so I'm going to come over this brown that I've already put in and just bring some of this grey. Don't want to press on hard. I don't want to take away from the colours that are underneath. I just want to almost put a bit of a glaze on the surface in areas. So I'm just glazing this pencil over the top, and glazing just means that you're putting a layer down, but you can still see all of those colours that we've put down underneath. So we try and keep the layer as translucent as we can. And that can be achieved by, first of all, not pressing on hard, as we always say. Secondly, the sort of pencils that you can use as well. The Polychromos are really, really good for glazing because they are quite a transparent, sort of translucent pencil. Whereas the heavier pencils that are the things like the Luminance and the Pablos and the Don't Light Fast, they are much more opaque. So these sort of translucent pencils are really nice for creating these glazes where you want to see all the colours underneath. That's not to say that the Luminance and the Pablo and the Don't Light Fast, that they don't work as glazes. I use them all in, you know, sort of for different projects. The Don't Light Fast can be really, really good at glazing over and really intensifying colours. I've used those in the past where I've just felt that the colours need a bit of a lift at the end, and, you know, I've found a colour that I could use in the Don't Light Fast. So, you know, I'm not saying that they won't work, but I'm saying the Polychromos are known for being a transparent or translucent pencil, and so you can get a really nice sort of glaze on them because they let all of the colours sort of still come through. I'm still just going over areas with this coal grey, just areas that I can see need that bit of grey adding to it. What I'm going to do, I am going to make this a little bit browner on his back, but what I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to start bringing these colours together with the buff titanium. I'm going to start blending. We've put quite a few layers down now. I'm just going to put a little bit of the apricot. No, I'm not. I'm going to put a little bit of the orange yellowish into that area because there's quite a yellow area there. I think it's where the sunlight's caught his back. So I'm going to pop that in there. And then I'm just going to bring these colours together with this buff titanium. And just blend. Now, as I think I've said before in this tutorial, I think I've said it, going to the circular strokes to blend will give us that nice diffused look that we want. I obviously want to keep it directional down here because I've got all these little bits of pencil that, you know, these little fur bits that I want. And I want to keep it a little bit directional in places. So here as well. We're going to bring the direction down along the bottom here, because I can see that it's coming back this way. But then when we get into the middle here, I'm just going to go to the circular strokes, and you can see again, I think I said before, but you can see how it's sort of pushing the pencil around on top because we've put the light layers and we haven't pushed it down into the paper. We can push that pencil around, and that's what helps to blend it. Push it around a little bit. And that's what helps to blend it. And I was just talking about the Polychromos, you know, being really good for glazing because they're transparent. The Caran is a really good pencil on the watercolour paper for blending. Now, it's not to say that the other brands aren't, but the Caran is, because it's a thick, opaque pencil. It fills the grain of the paper in quite quickly. So it's a great pencil to blend and fills the grain, or helps fill the grain in faster because there's a lot of pigment that comes off the end of the pencil and sits in the paper. And it starts to fill the grain in faster. And so when you go back over the top with your other pencils, it's almost created like a new surface, a new smoother surface for you to work on. So it's a really good, useful pencil for blending. Pablos are also thick and creamy and opaque, but in my opinion, they have more of a waxy, shiny, waxy feel than the Luminance. The Luminance, they're not chalky, but they have that sort of muted, sort of chalky feel to them when you use them, whereas the Pablos are sort of shinier, more waxy. So I tend not to use the Pablos on the watercolour paper unless it's towards the top layers and I don't have to put anything else on top of them. So for instance, if I wanted to put some highlights in with the eye, or you just saw that I used the Pablo here to put this highlight, you know, these highlights in, because I'm not going to need to go over the top of that. I just use them for the highlights or that sort of thing. Whereas the Luminance are still thick and creamy. I don't know if you can actually sort of see. I don't know if you can see from the tip of it, actually. That just looks a lot more waxy. And that has got that sort of more chalky feel to it. In fact, if I sort of pull a bit off, I can get a bit of that off on my fingers. I don't know if you can see that. But that actually comes off on my fingers. It's got this beautiful chalkiness to it. Whereas this is it's much more waxy. It is coming off of my fingers, but it's a very sort of waxy, really has its place. They're really good for use on the pastel mat and the drafting film, but for watercolor I tend not to use them too much unless this is the Pablo, unless it's on the top layers, because I find the other pencils then don't go over the top of them that well on the watercolor paper, because these are quite sort of shiny and waxy. But the Caran Luminance is a really good one for blending, and then you can put pencils back on top and it creates this lovely sort of smoother surface because just so much pigment's come off and gone into the tooth of the paper. I'm going to go in with this coal grey 5 down here, because this needs darkening down a little bit. And when I've just blended like that, you know, I may need to sort of go back in and put some of those colours back that you might have lost a little bit with the blending. But that's not taking a step backwards. That's just adding to the final sort of feel of the piece. Just because you have to sort of go back and add a bit. Well, you won't necessarily have to take the same amount of time as you did in the first place. You just need to put that, for instance, here I'm going back in with the Polychromos and just putting the glaze back on again, just to put that grey back in and to darken that down, and that just works really, really well. This bit on the edge here, I know we've been in with the Van Dyke brown. I also want to come in down here with a bit of the walnut brown. The Van Dyke brown is a lovely colour. It's if I get the Van Dyke brown, I can show you. So this is the Van Dyke brown, and we've used this, and it's a lovely brown with sort of that pinky tone. This is also a nice warm brown, the walnut brown. It's got more of a sort of reddy, chocolatey colour, so it's just a bit darker and a bit more intense than the Van Dyke brown, but both are really useful colours. And again, I'm just going over this buff titanium now. We've sort of created this extra surface, this sort of more smooth surface. And again, I'm just glazing with this walnut brown. Because all the colours are, you know, are already down there. I just want to deepen it a bit. So just a light coverage of this walnut brown, and I've just put that coal grey 5 in. It just brings those colours back to life again that we may have just sort of lost a little bit with the blending. But the blending was a really useful stage because it's put the colours together, you know, it's blended the colours and given us quite a natural sort of finish. And I just want to come back over again with this brown ochre 10%, where I can see that round here. And I wouldn't always blend with that buff titanium. I mean, you know, you could blend with any colour. It's just that I can see this lovely creaminess coming through this fur here. So I wanted to blend with that buff titanium. And that blending that we've just done, just going back to that blending with the buff titanium, this is the coal grey that I'm putting over this. And I don't know if you can see the way that it's going down, but it goes down even smoother than it did before now. You know, there aren't any pencil strokes coming through. It's just going down in a beautiful, even coverage. And that again is because we've blended with that Luminance pencil. Having said that though, that's how the pencils sort of work for me on the Fabriano, but every brand of paper will give you a different result. You know, you'll just have to get to know your pencils for the brand of paper that you're using. Roughly the same sort of principles will apply, but you know, there'll always be slight differences. For instance, you know, there are some brands of paper that the slice tool won't work on, and you know, but you just get to know your own tools really. So I'm still just building up this coat a little bit at a time. I really want to try and get, even though it's diffused, I want to try and get some, you know, texture in, and a lovely sort of whole complement of colours. Come in with this walnut brown up here. Now before I lose the edge of this, I'm going to use the slice tool and just take that out around there and a little bit on the edge there. Just don't want to lose that. I'll go around that edge with a little bit of dark sepia. Bring this dark sepia in on some of these landmarks as well. And back in with this Van Dyke brown here in the middle where I can see it's a bit more pink again. I don't want to cover this grey area up too much. I just want to put a tint of the brown in there. And then I'm going to bring a bit of this dark sepia and just darken this down at the top. And I'm just looking for these darker bits now to shape these darker bits of this fur. And just blend this. Just blend this dark sepia so that it's got like a natural sort of start and stop. It's not, I don't want a line. And this is just going to, even though it's all quite blurred, this is just going to give the sort of impression of the thickness of the fur, because we're putting in some of the darker bits in there now. We've built up some of the colours and the form. And now just thinking about some of these darker bits. This darker line round here, which is just sort of following the end of the tummy before it gets into the leg. I'm going to move on to the rump area. I think this might need a little bit more darkening down once I've got this area in, but I think it'll be easier to sort of see it and blend it all together at the end. Once I've got this other darker area in, it's looking okay. I think it's going to need a blend again. In fact, I'm going to go into a little bit of the brown ochre, 10%, to just blend this here anyway. And that there. And here as well, actually. going to blend this bit with the burnt ochre. That's quite sort of peachy around there. That bit that's coming off there is quite sort of blue, so I'm going to put some of the coal grey 3 into that bit. Let's bring the rump in. I'm going to come in with a coal grey 2 in this bit, because this is really quite sort of dark around here now. I'm going to come around here. And I'm coming back round to this warm grey one round here. And I'm just going to preserve his little tail in there. I'll put that in with some lighter colours. Okay, just like before, I'm going to go in with the nugget and bring this all the way down here. Following the, I just put my paper there, I'm just going to have to tip my hand back this way a little bit. So just following the direction of the back. There was this bit round here where we put that grey in. There's that little grey patch. So I'll put that there and make sure that's in. And I'm just pressing on lightly again and just getting a nice even coverage. There is a bit that comes down here, a bit of grey there, so I'm just going to pop that bit in. Around the back of this leg here, I'm going to come in with a bit of the olive brown and just see a lighter sort of slightly more greeny brown colour. Let's pop that in there. But if you only had the raw rumber, if you only had the warm grey 2, that would work. Let's pop that in there. And you can see that I'm sort of working you know, up the back leg, and I've just come all the way across like this, and that's okay as long as you're not going to get lots of stripes. Otherwise, keep your pencil strokes more randomly if you think that you're going to get what you don't want is, if I just take a piece of paper, what you don't want is to do one sort of you know, layer, and then the next layer, and you can see you've got a line there. You don't want that. You want to keep it so that it's always blended. So if you think that that is something that you might do, perhaps just keep your pencil, use those little V strokes that I've demonstrated before in other tutorials, and that just keeps it all sort of random and stops you just creating almost sort of like line after line after line, because what you don't want is a lot of stripes. in the portrait. There we go, so we've got a bit of colour there. Just putting a bit of that olive brown in the middle actually before I forget. Bringing that around. So I'm going to go in with a coal grey 5 and start to blend these two areas together. And put some of this dark colour on the back. I'm just shaping this pencil around this back end a little bit. I'm going to put quite a harsh sort of line in there for the minute. That's going to be quite dark down there. So I'll just pop that in. I'm going to take a coal grey 3 and I'm just going to start to blend this together a little bit. I'm just using some circular strokes. And these are just underlays at the minute, so we're not necessarily looking to get all of the texture in this one go. We're just looking to start to build up some colours. I'm just going to go to circular strokes to even this out a little bit. Still got quite a few layers. Nice light layers. I just want to come round this bit here. I don't want to lose this edge. This was that edge of the tummy. So what I want to do is come in with the dark sepia. We've got a little bit of hair that's sort of standing up. And again, this is still quite blurred. Well, not quite, it is very blurred. So I don't want to be putting too much texture in, but I do just want to put shapes in to suggest the way the fur's going. And obviously it's just coming off the back, out the back, and it's coming over onto his leg. So I'm just going to start to put a little bit of, like I say, I don't want too much definition in here because it's all quite muted, but I can just put a few shapes in to suggest the fact that the fur's coming up and over off his back and onto his leg. And it starts to come around up here. There was that little bit that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to pop that dark bit in there. And actually, that also then goes darker in there. So let's just plotted that in. We're just plotting the bits in again. And obviously this is much darker and a lot less colour. Or there are far few colours in here. I'll come back into the nugget in this area a little bit. And again, I'm just looking for shapes of colour. So colours that I can see in certain shapes. Popping those in. To build up the back of this coat slowly. I can see quite a bit of sort of pinky brown colour in here. So I'm going to go in with a bit of this Venetian red. Just keeping it really, really soft. Let's bring a bit of that pink through. Okay, let's go into this back area with a warm grey 4 and let's just blend this out a little bit. I need to blend mine. I can still see a little bit of grain in mine. You may not have the grain showing in yours, but I've just got a bit of that grain that I want to get rid of. So I'm going to come in with a warm grey 4. And with little circular strokes, I'm just going to blend this a little bit. Blend the colours that I've already put down. I'm going to use circular strokes on the back bit, but I'm just going to use little directional strokes here to just take this fur sort of off his back and onto his back end, onto his rump. So And then back with the little circular strokes. Just want to blend this. And I can even go over the other colours, so I can even go over these browns and red tones that we've put down, just to add a little glaze. I'm going to come in with a bit of a cold grey as well. I'm going to put a bit of cold grey on the back up here. Just want to press on lightly. I can put a glaze over the other colours, but I don't want to completely obliterate them. I don't want to take away from what was there underneath. Around the edge, I'm going to come in with a slightly lighter grey. So I'm going to come in with a cold grey 3, just on the edge around here. And just blend that out on the edge. I'm going to come into this little tail with a bit of the cold grey one. Just pop a tiny little bit of that tail in, a bit of colour into that tail. I'm going to come around here with the cold grey one as well. And blend out this light a bit. I want to come into this area on top as well with a little bit of the brown ochre 50%. Just to add, so over the top of this grey here, just to add a touch of this sandy colour. And back in with a bit of the Van Dyke brown as well. And I just keep going over the areas that I can see need a bit more blending now, where I might be able to see a little bit of grain still on the paper, or areas that I just think might need a little bit of darkening down. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just looking at the reference photograph and just looking for areas that just need to be darkened a bit. And obviously that's going to be different for all of us now. We're all going to be perhaps blending in slightly different areas and, you know, to different degrees, because it just depends how we put the pencils down to start with. So my blending here at this stage won't necessarily be the same as yours. You can use this Van Dyke brown again. It just creates a nice glaze. Can you see? I've just popped it over that grey that we've put down, that warm grey, and it just creates a nice sort of brown glaze over the top. And there's nothing wrong with using the circular strokes as long as I can't see those circles at the end. But of course you could use the directional strokes to blend as well. It's whatever works for you. And it's just a case of building up the values and areas to get to a stage that, you know, you're happy with and that you feel you've done enough to. And if you're not sure, the best thing to do is sort of go away, have a cup of tea, or have a look at it again the next day. And, you know, you look at it with a fresh pair of eyes, and you see things that you didn't necessarily see the day before. So it's better, if in doubt, it's better to sort of leave it, go away, have a break from it, and then come back to it, and you'll see things that you might come back to it and think, actually, you know, that's dark enough, I don't need to go any further. Or you might think, yeah, that does need some more work to it. But by this time we'll all probably be at slightly different stages. That's okay. And if you feel that yours is blended enough, then feel free to move on to the next part of the video. And I come down onto the back end in a minute and down onto his legs. It helps me to use the circular strokes at this sort of these latter stages, almost like sort of glazing over the top of the colours that are already there, because it gives me, I find the circular strokes give me a nice smooth blended transition between one colour to the next. So that works quite nice. Don't always do it, you know, sometimes I'll use the transition strokes, but for this project, because he's all sort of blurred out at the back, I think the circular strokes work quite well. But it's not something that I would always do, you know, sometimes I will blend with the directional strokes. It just depends what we need. And I'm just going to take the coal grey 2 and just put an extra little bit into this tail. Not much that's going to go into that tail. Blend it with the silver grey as well. A little bit of that silver grey from the Luminance in. And these sort of lighter areas up here, I'm going to just use a little bit of the silver grey from the Luminance in these areas. Like I've said before, the Luminance is a really good pencil to fill in the grain, actually, because it's thick, it's opaque, it fills in the grain beautifully. And in that respect, it's a nice pencil to glaze with at the end, because not only does it glaze, it fills in the grain. Sometimes a little bit more sort of successfully than the Polychromos might. Although the Polychromos are still really great pencils and are really useful on the portraits. Let's bring a little bit of this silver grey in. But if you didn't have this silver grey from the Luminance, then just go with the coal grey 2 from the Polychromos. Just going to blend out this tummy underneath also with the silver grey. And the other one that's a good pencil also to blend with is the buff titanium. So where I can see that it's slightly more creamy, I'm going to blend with this buff titanium. And again, because it's a Luminance pencil, it'll blend, it'll help fill the grain in, help with these transitions between the colours. So I don't know if you can see that, but me just sort of blending and glazing over the top of these colours with either that silver grey from the Luminance or this, the buff titanium. I don't know if you can see on the video, but I've actually just filled in that grain an awful lot faster than I would have done if I'd have just been using the Polychromos alone. Now, you don't always want to fill in the grain fast, but by this stage now, because I am just blending and I'm just sort of bringing the colours together, I do want to fill in any of that grain that's left as far as I can, as far as possible. And so it's really, really useful at this stage. I come down this side on the back of his leg and go in with the cold grey one to bring this base layer down. Get a nice base layer in there. I'm going to come down here with the warm grey 4 from the Polychromos and just coming down in the direction of the leg. Bring a nice light layer of colour over this leg at the back. And I'm obviously moving on to this leg part. I might still go back and do a little bit of blending and darkening down. But, you know, if you are not ready to move on, then that's fine. Just stop the video and carry on blending until you're happy that you've, you know, blended your colours and filled in that grain. And when I'm filling in the grain with the Polychromos, I'm still not pressing on hard. That's quite important. I'm still not, you know, really sort of pressing down. I'm not a great fan of burnishing. That's just my opinion. There are areas where I'll burnish. So, for instance, maybe an eye or, you know, something that I want to look nice and shiny and glassy. I will do that. But otherwise, I'm not a great fan of burnishing in the true sense where you sort of pressing on hard and pressing the pigment down. The reason that I'm not a great fan of that is because it for me, it does make my work just a bit too sort of glossy. I don't want that. Unless I do want a glossy area, obviously that's different. But on something that I want to be lovely matte and silky, like for instance this reindeer's coat, I'll just keep adding soft, gentle, light layers until the grain's filled in. I won't sort of press on hard, I won't burnish. I'll just keep using lots of light layers until that grain's filled in. Maybe using different brands of pencils. You can see that the Luminance did a great job up there at sort of filling the grain in for me. But just keeping those layers light, and that way I won't build up such a shiny area if I don't want a shiny area, you know, in an area that I don't want it to be shiny. Building up lots of light layers helps me keep this area matte. And that just works for me. And I am using quite long strokes here. But these strokes, hopefully you can't really see too much of the pencil line. It's not my intention to see long strokes, as in long fur strokes. I'm using sort of fairly long strokes to get a nice even coverage and quite a quick coverage. But I am still keeping these pencil strokes quite sort of uniform and soft and gentle, so that I just get a coverage of the colour down rather than lots of big long sort of fur lines. So I've got the grey down there, and then I'm going to carry on down again, coming off. Now the coat, as it comes around the body, it's not coming straight down, as I've just put a coat straight down just to get a coverage, but it's not actually coming straight down. It's sort of coming across this way a little bit. So I'm going to start, for these layers that are going on now, I'm going to start to shape the fur around this leg area. So I'm starting to bring it over and curve it over. Still really gently. The curve's quite subtle, but I want the coat to follow around the shape of his leg now, which I didn't worry about before. I just put a layer straight down. I'm going to come just off the side of this tummy area here. And again, I'm using really, really light pressure. If I want to make an area darker, I'll just go over it a couple of times rather than pressing on harder. It's got a little darker bit there. I'm just going to plot that in. I'm just shaping these pencil strokes just around in the way that I can see it falling down the leg, the way that I can see the coat falling down the leg. I'm going to come down here with a coal grey, so I'm coming in with a coal grey 5 underneath this area. And just blending that up into the tummy area a little bit, just to break that line up. And it is quite a slow process because, you know, we're on probably the third or fourth, probably the fourth layer now. And you think you're not getting there, and all of a sudden your colours sort of start coming together, your grain starts to fill and it starts to look more intense. And you realise that actually you have been, you know, filling this grain in, even though you didn't think you were getting anywhere with it. And if you're struggling to get a sort of a fairly even coverage, a nice even coverage that's all quite sort of uniform, I'm going to go back in with this Van Dyke brown again and bring this down the side of this leg. I'm going to come into this area and blend this area, and I'm going to use the French Grey 10% from the Luminance range, because again it's a nice thick sort of creamy pencil to blend the colours that I've already put down. If you don't have that, then you could just go in with the warm grey 2 from the Polychromos, or any warm grey really, any warm grey that you've got, you know, whatever brand of pencils you're working with, just go in with one of your lighter warm greys. going to come into this with a warm grey 6 and just darken this. Darken this under here. And I'm just going to think about adding a few of these little creases that are coming down the side down here. Just a couple of creases, bit of texture in the fur. And it's definitely going to take quite a few layers to sort of fill in all the grain in all of this back area. It's just a case of working backwards and forwards, building up the areas until I'm happy that this grain's filled in enough for me. So I'm probably going to go a bit quiet whilst I just work on this, because all I'm doing is just sort of going backwards and forwards, finding the pencil colour that I need and building up this colour and building up these valleys on the back. So there's not really anything new that I'm doing at the minute. So if I just go quiet, it's just because I'm just sort of getting into the blending zone, really. And I can quite easily just lose myself in a drawing, and several hours have passed and before I know it, I've lost half of the day and I've just been, drawing. So okay, so I think that's a good place to leave this part of the tutorial here. So we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much for drawing along with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next part of the tutorial. Thanks very much. Bye for now.